The X-Files Season 1 Review. Hello and welcome to my review of Season 1 of The X-Files. Now, The X-Files is one of my favourite shows. It has been pretty much since it started in Australia back in 1994. It started late 93 in America, of course, but it was 94 in Australia. Though I haven't really talked about it very much on this channel. I mean, I've included it on a number of multi-fandom music vids, but the only time I've actually talked about it was a brief review of one particular episode a few years ago. That's one of the episodes in this season, in fact. But I thought it was time to perhaps go a little more in-depth on this. It is one of my favourite shows. And what better way to do that than with a season review? So, let's get on with it. Season 1 begins with an episode simply entitled Pilot, which introduces Mulder and Scully for the first time and has them work together for the first time on a case investigating apparent alien abductions in a small town. Now, this is a good episode. On first transmission, I liked this episode, but I actually preferred episode 2, which is Deep Throat, which is similar kind of themed in that it's about aliens, but it's about military aircraft that may or may not have been modified with extraterrestrial technology. Now, on first viewing, I actually liked episode 2, Deep Throat, which introduces the character of Deep Throat, played by the wonderful Jerry Hardin, more than the pilot. Though on subsequent viewings, I actually liked the pilot more. I'm not sure why, but I do. Episode 3 is entitled Squeeze. Now, this is the first of the Monster of the Week type episodes. Now, I have to be honest, I really prefer the standalone episodes these days to the alien conspiracy episodes. Not least because the conspiracy storyline just devolved into such muddled, incomprehensible nonsense where even a dramatic development that actually seemed interesting and satisfying could later be retconned and just said, oh no, that didn't happen really. That sort of thing really starts to try your patience after a while. So I actually much prefer the standalone episodes at this point, and Squeeze is definitely the first classic episode, with the show's first human monster in the form of the very memorable Eugene Victor Toombs, a seemingly immortal murderer who eats people's livers and has the ability to, as the episode title suggests, squeeze his way through even the smallest of entrances. This is a classic episode. Episode 4 is entitled Conduit. Now, this is another UFO episode. To me, that's a bit much. 3 out of the first 4 being another alien UFO episode. This is also probably the weakest of those 3. I mean, it's got some interesting character stuff as it kind of goes a bit more into Mulder's obsession with his sister's disappearance. She was apparently abducted by aliens when he was a child. He apparently was there and witnessed it, though he's only discovered this via hypnosis, which is deeply dodgy, to put it mildly. Now, that's interesting, but like I said, another kind of UFO alien episode, 3 out of 4 is a bit much, and this is certainly the weakest of those 3 as well. Now, the next episode is The Jersey Devil. Now we're back to the standalone monster episodes, this time with a sort of evolutionary throwback beast woman wandering around New Jersey eating people, as you do. Now, this isn't a particularly great episode, though I think it's probably better than its reputation. It's a decent enough story. It's got a decent enough atmosphere. It's just not one of the absolute classics. Episode 6 is entitled Shadows, which is the show's first kind of venture into definitely supernatural stuff. It's a ghost story, basically, with a young woman who's a secretary at a company where there's some decidedly corrupt and homicidal corporate shenanigans going on, who's being protected by the ghost of her former boss. This is a decent, solid episode. I like it. It's not one of, again, it's as with The Jersey Devil, it's not one of the more popular episodes, but I've always enjoyed it. The next episode is Ghost in the Machine. Now, this is an artificial intelligence episode. Again, this isn't a very popular episode, I don't think, and it's not one of my favourites. It's not a bad episode. It's an interesting idea. A computer with its AI that starts killing people to protect itself. It just comes across as being a little bit flat. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. I think the reason that it falls flat is probably something that they did on purpose, but it still doesn't work. And that is, the AI is just this thing that doesn't say anything. It just does things, but it's got no personality. Now, I can understand why they do that, because you give an AI, a homicidal AI, a personality, and you immediately go down the 2001 HAL route. But on the other hand, I think that works. I mean, there's an episode of another show that I reviewed recently, Wicked Science. There's an episode of that called Crazy for You, with a similar AI that becomes malevolent, and it does a personality. And yes, it's a very, very HAL-like personality. In that case, it's probably a very deliberate homage / parody. But it still works, and it's still creepy. And I think the reason this episode falls a little bit flat is that the AI doesn't really have a personality, so it comes across as just kind of too nebulous a threat to really be a strong kind of villain or monster. Again, it's an okay episode, but it's not one of the best. Episode 8 is called Ice. Now, David Duchovny himself calls this the show's first really rocking episode. I don't agree with that. I would certainly say that Squeeze was a really rocking episode. But this is definitely a classic stuff. Basically, it's The Thing meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. An Arctic research team go nuts and kill one another. Mulder and Scully go off with doctors and scientists to find out what's happening, and find out there's this little worm-like organism that gets into people and basically sends them crazy. And you don't know who it might be until it's too late. It's a great, strong, scary episode. The next episode is called Space. Now, this is an odd one. It's set at NASA, and it's basically about the commander of the NASA team, who was once an astronaut, who may or may not be possessed or somehow linked to an alien that he encountered in space many years ago. This is a bit of an odd episode. Again, I don't get the impression that it's terribly popular. It kind of makes use of the face on Mars kind of image that's very famous. Again, this isn't a bad episode. I kind of like it. It's perfectly watchable. It just never quite inches into classic territory. Episode 10 is Fallen Angel, and we're in an alien episode again, with a UFO crash site that the military has covered up, and what may be an alien on the loose, an alien with a very deadly touch. This is an okay episode. I get the feeling this is quite a popular one. I'm not really a big fan, to be honest. I mean, like I said, maybe it's just that I'm not really into the conspiracy kind of stuff these days. It's okay. Not a favourite. Episode 11, on the other hand, is a favourite. This is called Eve, and it's a great story that really goes through some terrific twists. Two fathers are inexplicably murdered at the same time, in the same way, on opposite sides of the country. And Mulder and Scully find out that their 8-year-old daughters look identical to each other. And trying to figure out exactly what the hell is going on leads them into some very dark stuff. Now, this is a great episode. I will say this. There was an episode of The Blacklist a few years ago that basically ripped this episode off to death. Ultimately, the story turned out to be different, but the opening act was basically a complete rip-off of Eve. I'm really surprised that they didn't freaking sue, because it was so shameless. But this is a great episode. Episode 12 is called Fire. which focuses on a pyrokinetic, i.e. somebody who has the ability to start fires just by thinking about it. The villain is played by Mark Sheppard, who Doctor Who fans will know from the Matt Smith two-parter The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. And this is a solid episode. Some of the fake British accents are a bit comical. But it's a solid enough episode with some good effects. Nothing particularly special, not as good as Eve, but still pretty solid. Episode 13 is called Beyond the Sea. Now, this is quite a famous episode. It's got a very strong performance from Brad Dourif as a death row inmate who claims that he's psychic. Now, this is a really good episode. I think it's perhaps a little bit overrated, but it's still a really strong and interesting episode. That is not the case, unfortunately, with the next episode, which is called Gender Bender, which gets my vote as the worst episode of Season 1 by quite some difference. Basically, some people are being killed by somebody who may be both male and female, and it gets really, really stupid. This is a really boring episode that's also really dumb, and it has quite the funniest, unintentionally, funniest kind of tag punchline that you can imagine. It's supposed to be a twist. It's absolutely hilariously stupid. This is the worst episode of Season 1, in my opinion. It's just crap. Episode 15 is called Lazarus. An FBI agent and a bank robber are both shot during the same robbery, and the FBI agent wakes up apparently possessed by the bank robber. The FBI agent also being a former supervisor and boyfriend of our Scully. Now, this isn't a very popular episode from what I can gather, but I rather like it. It's a strong kind of mystery episode. There's a bit of a siege element to it, and there's a nice ambiguity as well as to whether or not he really is possessed, or whether, as Scully suggests, being shot has kind of given him a psychotic break, and he's kind of adopted the persona of the man that he's been chasing after for so long. I think this is a good episode. I like this episode. And the same applies to the next episode, which is Young at Heart, which is another one that I get the impression isn't very popular, but I really, really like it. It's a sort of a revenge story with a psychopath from Mulder's past who is apparently dead, but apparently not, and coming back to get revenge. Now, it takes a while to kind of get to the twist. There's a few things kind of thrown in here that seem a bit unnecessary. The number one being the salamander hand, which is completely irrelevant to the plot, but seems to be thrown in there just to kind of make the audience know that this is an X-File, because it kind of takes till the second half of the episode for the Fountain of Youth stuff to come in. So the first half almost looks like just like some kind of cop show with the hero being targeted by an old enemy. So I think they kind of throw in the salamander hand stuff just to try and make it clear before the twist that this is still an X-File. But I really like this episode. I think it's really strong. I think the central idea is really interesting. And, the revenge from a former enemy may be an old cliched plot, but it still works. Episode 17 is EBE. We're back to the UFO stuff, with Deep Throat leaking information about a UFO that was apparently shot down over Iraq and whose inhabitant may be being transported through the US. This again, I'm not. I keep saying this. I'm not really big on the UFO conspiracy episodes these days. This episode is notable for introducing the lone gunmen, who are very likable and very funny and very popular supporting characters, and I like it for that. But again, it's just okay. I'm not a big fan. The next episode is Miracle Man, which is about a young man, a religious young man, who can apparently heal people just by touching him, touching them, only for things to start to go wrong. Now, honestly, this is probably my second least favourite of the season. It's not as dumb as Genderbender, I will give it that. It's at least well written. It's still just a bit dull, though, in my opinion. It just doesn't really do anything for me. I guess I just find the central concept a bit of a yawn. The next episode is Shapes, and we're into werewolf territory. You can't go wrong with a good werewolf. And this is a pretty good episode. I mean, I don't think this is regarded as a particular classic, but I've always liked it. It's got a strong, spooky atmosphere. And, you can't go wrong with werewolves, and a show like The X-Files should be able to do a werewolf episode, and this is a pretty solid one. I've always liked it. I don't like it as much as the next episode, of course, which is Darkness Falls, which is the episode that I actually reviewed on its own a few years ago. It's the only time I've done that. And my opinion has not changed. This is still classic episode, one of my favourites. Mulder and Scully get trapped in a remote area of a national forest after 30 loggers vanish and find themselves at the mercy of basically ancient, awakened killer insects that only come out at night. This is an absolute cracking episode. Really scary, just really great stuff. Probably in my top 20 of the overall show. Now, there's an idea for a music video. Episode 21 is called Tombs, and as the name suggests, Eugene Victor Toombs is back. We've got a sequel, season 1, and we're doing sequels already. This is the first appearance of assistant director Walter Skinner, played by Mitch Pileggi, of course, who will go on to become a very important character as the show goes forward. I think this is a good episode. I don't think it's as good as Squeeze, to be honest. I mean, apparently some people think this episode is better. Apparently the production crew think this episode is better than Squeeze. Apparently there was some sort of behind-the-scenes stuff going on the first one. But I have to say, you can't see that on screen, and I kind of prefer Squeeze. This is still a decent episode. It's got a very nice, visceral ending to kind of ensure he won't be coming back again. But yeah, I think I still prefer Squeeze. Episode 22 is Born Again, which sees a bunch of unexplained deaths linked to a little girl that leads Mulder to believe that she may be the reincarnation of a murdered policeman, somehow after revenge on those who killed him. This is an okay episode. I mean, we've kind of done this before. We've already done the creepy little girls thing with Eve earlier in the season and Better, and we've kind of already done the sort of ghosts possession avenging a murder back in Shadows, both of which I would say are probably better episodes than this. But again, it's not bad. It's okay. It's perfectly watchable. I don't mind it. It's just a bit of a mishmash. Episode 23 is Roland, and this is a bit weird because this is 2 episodes in a row in which we basically got someone who's dead kind of using somebody else in a way to get their revenge. In the previous episode, of course, it was a little girl who may be reincarnated. Here it's a mentally handicapped man named Roland who is being kind of controlled by a murdered doctor, and in order to make him do things not only that he wouldn't do, but things that he wouldn't be able to do under normal circumstances because of his handicap. This is a decent episode. I'd probably say it's a little bit better than Born Again, simply on account of the lead performance from the actor. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, Veljko Ivanek, I probably pronounced that completely wrong, who gives a really, really good performance as Roland. But again, this kind of revenge from beyond the grave through somebody else, we've kind of done this already. We did it just the last episode. I think those two could probably have been spaced out a bit more because it looks a bit, dodgy. Then we come to episode 24, which is the season finale, and it's called The Erlenmeyer Flask. Now, this arguably is the first episode that really kind of kicks off the conspiracy storyline for real. We've had a number of kind of UFO episodes, we've had a number of alien related episodes. This is the first time where you really kind of start in on what the actual plot is, what the actual conspiracy is, at least until they change their minds later on. It's a pretty solid. I mean, like I said, I've said it before 12 times already in this vid. I'm not a big fan of these episodes, but this is a pretty dramatic and well done and very strong season finale. Yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. Overall, I'm a pretty big fan of season 1. Actually, I'd probably say it's one of my favourite seasons. It got the show off to a very good start straight away, and there's a number of episodes in it that are still what I would call classics, like Ice and Squeeze and Darkness Falls and Eve. It's a really strong season. Overall, I'd give the X-Files season 1 a strong A-.